Welcome, one and all, to the Damage Report. I'm John Adarola. We've got a big old show planned for you in advance of a big old election day. Primaries happening in multiple states, including the state that we're in right now, California. Not far from where I'm sitting, Michael Schor, longtime friend of the network, is going to be having his primary race. And joining us to break down the news today is someone who's going to be joining TYT for our election coverage later on tonight, contributor to Rebel HQ, Jessica Burbank. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Good to be here always.
Great to have you here. Are you excited for primary night?
I am. We have a lot of progressives running. Hopefully it goes as well as our last set of primaries. We'll see.
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, this is the Narrows thing I'm still a little bitter about. It's going to a recount. This is going to be the first election coverage here at TYT that you're participating in, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's awesome. A woman, a few words. Anyway, but I do want to send people to, we'd been talking about before we went live, that you recently did a breakdown of some of the great progressives that are going to be having their races called tonight. That's available on your TikTok, correct?
Yes, it's on TikTok. I feel like just the kids are always asking, where are progressives running? Who do I even vote for? Why is there not a list of this? So I just made a huge TikTok of it.
Yeah, no, I think that that's very helpful, especially like these primary nights are complicated. There's a lot of different states. It's difficult to track all of this. And by their very nature, these primary races don't get much media attention. If they feature a strong progressive, they're even less likely for the media to want to focus on them because they don't want them to get any cred. So very, very helpful to give people that breakdown. So I'm glad that you did that. And with that said, we've got a lot that we're gonna be talking about through the course of today's show. Not only a bit more of a preview of what's gonna be happening later on this week when the January 6th committee presentations formally begin. Jamie Raskin of that committee apparently is feeling pretty confident about what they've been able to gather. We've got to profile some awesome, really awful candidates who they're not gonna be, their races are not gonna be called tonight, but I want to give you a little bit of a heads up about who might be representing some states, updates on guns, the 2024 presidential race, as well as if you're watching our full show, we're gonna dive into the right's attempt to get women excited to be a part of the right. Gonna try to motivate them a little bit of life advice coming from strong pro-woman guys like Charlie Kirk. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. We're gonna have that for you later on. In advance of that, though, if you're on a platform that allows for liking things like that, that'd be great. You can go ahead and do that. If you want to send us any comments, tweets, super chats, or anything, we'll respond as we go. But with all that said, Jessica, are you ready to jump into this thing?
Ready to go.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start off with this.
Yes, the committee has found evidence of concerted planning and premeditated activity. The idea that all of this was just a rowdy demonstration that spontaneously got a little bit out of control is absurd. You don't almost knock over the US government by accident.
Exactly, and that is Jamie Raskin, who wants to get you hyped about the January 6th committee hearings that are gonna be taking place later on this week. Actually, on Thursday, they're gonna be giving formal presentations, including evidence, photos and video, testimony, all of that we have never heard about what exactly happened on January 6th with the insurrection. He is saying there that this was what he considers to be a conspiracy. Both himself and Liz Cheney have talked about it in those terms. But also there was a follow-up question from the reporter. If it's a conspiracy, is it a conspiracy that you believe Donald Trump is central to? And this is what he had to say.
And is Donald Trump the center of this conspiracy? Are you able to connect those dots?
Well, people are going to have to make judgments themselves about the relative role that different people played. But I think that Donald Trump and the White House were at the center of these events. That's the only way really of making sense of them all. The select committee has found evidence about a lot more than incitement here. And we are going to be laying out the evidence about all of the actors who were pivotal to what took place on January 6th.
So I'm gonna be honest, he kind of revved up a bit there near the end when he got into the area of what they believe they can show, it being more than incitement. But to the initial question, Jessica, when he was asked about Donald Trump being central to it, it felt like he was kind of stepping carefully. I don't know, is that how you interpreted that?
Yeah, absolutely. Seems to be stepping carefully, but others that are involved with the investigation and the special committee aren't, right? They're clearly saying that Trump is in the center of this. So I'm not sure why he's stepping carefully, but I do think that we might see after this investigation, sedition, seditious conspiracy would be one of the possible charges, also insurrection. And you have a lot of pundits saying, it's really hard to prove insurrection because there has to be a significant amount of violence that occurs. But destruction of property in the United States is considered violence. And so there was a lot of destruction of property that happened. And so I think after this, there's a good chance we could see criminal charges come against Donald Trump. That's best case scenario.
Yeah, look, I don't know exactly what the threshold is supposed to be. I don't know how much violence counts as enough violence. I mean, people died, lots and lots of cops were injured. It's the sort of event that generally the right in other circumstances, I believe, would agree was sufficiently violent. In this case, I'm not an expert, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know anything. It seems insane that they can't pin any of this to him. I mean, all of the different simultaneous schemes, including ones that we're gonna be discussing later on in this block, he sent them there. He literally sent them there. He waited as they did the attack. He gave that incredibly shady, like, yeah, you're great people, I love you, but you gotta go, like little speech. I don't know what your level of expectation is for what's going to come on Thursday, but I just have had any of the enthusiasm for the possibility of consequences drained out of me over the past 14 or so months. But I don't know, what are you expecting to come out of this?
I think it's interesting timing, right? Because we also have this grand jury in Fulton County in Georgia right now that just started hearing witness testimony on June 1st, right? They pushed it past the primary because the DA said it might affect the primary. That's DA Fani Willis, who's on the case, who's very confident in the jury that they've selected. They're not choosing indictments, this jury particularly. They can't do that, but they can recommend criminal charges. And to have this investigation end and then have the hearing in a prime time slot is kind of interesting timing, right when they're hearing witness testimony, when they're considering whether or not, we have criminal charges that we can press against Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think they're hoping that that's going to lead to more focus on it, and maybe they'll be right. I think a lot of it is going to come down to they've implied that they have all this sorts of information that we haven't seen yet. We're going to have to see it. There have been a series of leaks through the course of this thing. Some of them have generated a little bit of media attention. I think most of them felt like, absent any context, any understanding of how politics works right now and how it's developed or devolved over the past few years would seem to be significant. We've learned all sorts of things about how, super close Trump circle people were speaking to him, what their fears were, how clear they were that this was his duty to stop it from going on. And that stuff was thrown out there. And then like the Kevin McCarthy stuff hasn't mattered. It didn't even matter to Trump, let alone to any of the Trump fans. It didn't even cause Trump to get rid of him. So they're gonna do what they can to get through, but there, I think, are certain obstacles to that. There has been a normalization of what happened on January 6th. People do not see it as nearly as horrifying as they did back then. Also, some of them literally will not be seeing this hearing. So as many people watching this might be aware now, the hearings will be aired on CNN and MSNBC. But also on the top 3 major networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. That said, for a conservative, they can see it on Fox Business. Maybe some people watch that, I guess. But Fox News is not going to be covering it live. The primetime televised hearings presenting the evidence that there was an attempted coup, they're just not going to be covering it, Jessica, because I guess it's not inherently newsworthy.
Yeah, I think people always point to media news bias by the commentary around the stories that are covered. But the biggest bias in the news is choosing what to cover and what not to cover, especially when you look at what Fox chooses to cover and not to cover. And even Fox uses tactics where they'll be covering a press conference, like after the Buffalo shooting, where the audio quality is so poor and the volume so low, people are inclined to just change the channel. And I think you're right about, with the McCarthy tapes, we didn't see a lot come out of that. And a lot of what's been happening around January 6th is, we have a lot of Donald Trump appointed judges. We have a lot of the legal system failing to hold people accountable. And I think that's why the Georgia story is especially special. This DA, Fani Willis, is the daughter of a former Black Panther who fought for the right to vote. She's the one that's on this case. And she says that the grand jury looks like the diversity she sees in her country, and she's very optimistic. And we have a judge that doesn't have a record, working at a corporate law firm. He's been a public servant and then got elected to office. And so I think just getting one charge in Georgia against Donald Trump would disqualify him from running, which I think is good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
With the Supreme Court in the look, I am Buzz Killington basically. Would the Supreme Court just sit idly by while a lower court judge did that? I don't know. I mean, look, they're serious conservative legal jurists. They're not partisan actors. They would never act purely for the benefit of the party that they totally don't identify with. Anyway, maybe you're right. Maybe good things can happen. I don't know. I'm generally pretty pessimistic about the world, but some of the Marvel shows have been pretty great. So sometimes good things happen. It's not often these days. I really hope that they have some awesome, compelling footage. And I do think that there is one potential thing. This is, I think, a dark horse possible cultural move that might help us when it comes to these hearings. You wanna know what it is? I'm gonna tie this into Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, because there were a lot of people that got a lot of views and made a lot of money by obsessively focusing on what was going on in that trial. And then the trial ended. And I have to imagine that there was a bit of whiplash for some of those people. These are people that didn't even used to cover political stuff or trial stuff. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I can do this and get 1,000 times as many views. And then that cuts off. So I imagine that at this point, a few days on, there are ants under their skin, and they're probably looking for something trial-ish to talk about. Maybe this could be it. Maybe they'll be, granted, it doesn't have like poop in the bed, and I don't think there's like a really high profile woman to burn at the stake for multiple days in a row, but it's still dramatic. And it's arguably as consequential on the substance as the Johnny Depp thing. So I don't know, what do you think? Will that maybe lead to more people tuning in or trying to make a big deal out of it?
It sounds like I'm gonna have to turn it into skits on TikTok, just like the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, to get it trending, to get people watching it. I think it's a good idea. I'll clip the spicy parts of it.
Yeah, exactly. Can we get like, if they play testimony, can we do like a roundup of the most pathetic parts of the testimony? Like maybe we could do that and make a thumbnail of them crying. I don't know. What's that?
A highlight reel.
Exactly. That's what people want. That's what people want. We're learning more about the attempted legal side of the coup after the 2020 election, specifically in Georgia. And let's talk a little bit about what was going on. Now, we know that in Georgia, as in many states, there was an attempt to take the electors, the sort of human component of the Electoral College, the people who are designated to like officially cast the ballots that officially decide who becomes president. And the Republicans decided that that's not convenient to us because those people are gonna do what they're supposed to do. We're gonna choose our own electors. And they're just gonna say that Trump won. Now, they would argue that they're not doing anything wrong in doing that. Everything they were doing was legal and constitutional. That said, take a look at how they were communicating about this little plot. A staffer for Trump's presidential campaign instructed Republicans planning to cast Electoral College votes for Trump in Georgia, despite the fact that Joe Biden had won, to operate in, quote, complete secrecy, according to emails obtained by the Washington Post. This is Robert Sinners, the campaign's election operations director for Georgia, who went on to say, I must ask for your complete discretion in this process. Your duties are imperative to ensure the end result, a win in Georgia for President Trump, but will be hampered unless we have complete secrecy and discretion. This was the day before 16 Republicans gathered in Georgia to sign certificates declaring themselves to be the electors. And by the way, the email goes on to instruct the electors to tell security guards at the building that they have to do this in that they have an appointment with one of two different state senators. Please, at no point should you mention anything to do with presidential electors or speak to the media, which is definitely how you talk about your totally on the up and up, cool constitutional plot that you're doing. What do you think?
I mean, honestly, these people are very clearly so good at doing things that should be illegal, but are not technically illegal, because the precise definition of seditious conspiracy means that you have to use physical force. They're not using physical force. And if anyone looks at this and still believes we need the Electoral College and should have the Electoral College versus popular democracy is insane, because this is the kind of thing that it leads to and probably will lead to in the future, with people like this seeing that they can grab power in this way.
Yeah, and look, the thing about the response to the 2020 election, the thing about January 6th was we simultaneously have to care about and take seriously and attempt to ward off future iterations of multiple veins of this coup. We don't want more January 6th. We don't want more, whether you consider it to be a relatively organic grassroots violent mob or a mob that was assembled by right-wing political actors directly or indirectly connected to Donald Trump and right-wing organizations and then dispatched to do this. Whichever you think it is, we don't want more of that, certainly. We also don't want the electors things or the attempt to pressure Mike Pence or the various other legal schemes that weren't explicitly violent, but were just as hostile to the Constitution, to the core of American democracy. The issue really is that people don't seem to be bothered by either of those things anymore, a lot of people, and I'm gonna get to one poll result that I think demonstrates that. And we also are no better equipped to ward off either of those things. In fact, arguably, with the fact that the right has been so successful in changing election laws in multiple states, including some of those who were core to the 2020 debacle, and have been running a ton of insane partisan hacks to take over secretaries of state, chiefs of county elections boards and things like that. We're actually less well equipped to ward off these things. And so as we enter into a week that is supposed to be the highlight of the investigation into January 6th and maybe our last best effort to get people focused on this, I am extremely worried about both aspects of this, Jessica.
Yes, I think the law and justice are not the same. We keep talking about this I was just on the watch list yesterday and we're having a similar conversation. But if they didn't do anything technically illegal, that shouldn't matter for American voters. They're trying to change the outcome of an election so that the result is not what the majority of people in this country wanted. Does that sit right with you? Is that the kind of country you want to live in? And you're right, a lot of these people don't care about democracy anymore. They just want the people that they support to get in office by any means. And they're really advocating for the downfall of democracy, whether they realize it or not. And I think many of them do, and they just don't care. And that's really scary because this is a huge faction of our country that is no longer interested in democratic processes. And they've made it really clear in all of this talk on, especially Tucker Carlson's show about, great white replacement theory and things of that nature. They really don't want popular democracy in this country. And it means that they're going to keep supporting candidates that will continue eroding our democracy.
Yeah, 100%. I think that when the numbers demographically, racially seem to benefit them, given the choice, they'd like to have the vote on their side. They'd like that. Why not? That makes them feel good. It's like doing like really easy, low cost charity work or something. Like it makes you feel better or whatever. But at the end of the day, they want to win. They want the power and they're willing to dispense with democracy. They've been very clear about that. One final piece of evidence going into the January 6th. I just want to read, we don't have this as a graphic, I don't believe, but CBS has a new poll on interpretations by party of what happened on January 6th. And so for instance, was this an insurrection? 85% of Democrats say yes, 21% of Republicans say yes. That actually isn't even the result that I find most troubling. I think that the word insurrection can mean different things. I think it would be more insurrection-y if there had been tanks involved, less if I think that there's sort of a scale of insurrection, but was it an attempt to try to overthrow the government? Only 18% of Republicans say yes. It was explicitly designed to intimidate Congress into voting differently. 47% say it was patriotism. 56% say it was defending freedom. And January 6th, like not the senators and the reps, the crowd, that is supposed to be the part of all of this that is easiest for us to identify as unacceptable, as crossing a line. There's legal ambiguity and complications about Donald Trump trying to intimidate people, or a call to Raffensperger, or the alternate electors thing, or the trying to stop the certification by the elected officials. All of that, they can create all of this dust that's supposed to cloud the motives there. But the mob of violent people breaking through the windows and doors and trying to kill people with their bare hands, that's supposed to be the part that all of us can agree was bad. And 56% of Republicans say that was just defending freedom. Nearly half say it was patriotism. It wasn't just a morally ambiguous thing. It was a beneficial good thing. It was a moral thing that they did. And that is the environment that we are going to launch into these hearings in, an environment where so many conservatives approve of what happened and aren't even going to see the hearings where the evidence laying out what actually was done is revealed. Any final thoughts, Jessica?
Yeah, I think about how things like this can embolden certain people. I think about the Colbert Report and how that was satire. And if you watch the Colbert Report and you were on the left, you were like, this is great fun. We're poking fun at conservatives. But if you watch the Colbert Report and you were conservative, you were like, this is great fun. He's poking fun at leftists. I think this trial can have a similar impact where some people who believe that this was, a patriotic act fighting for freedom, they might look at this hearing and say, wow, these guys were really fighting on our side for us from the inside, and support them even more. And then the rest of us are going to be horrified by the evidence that's presented. I think it could have a polarizing effect.
I think that you might be right. We're gonna have to see. I mean, if any even watch it, but you're right, they might like it. I don't know. I don't think many of them have seen like a lot of the footage of, the trying to like take a pro-cop flag and beat a cop to death with it. But if they did, would they actually be appalled by what they saw? You might be onto something. Maybe they wouldn't.
Do you have a subversive thinker, living or dead, could be a writer, could be even a business person, that you think people should look up, look into, know more about, that's underrated and would influence people in a good direction?
Subversive thinker that's underrated?
Yeah.
I'll probably get in trouble for saying this. I'd say, how about like Theodore Kaczynski?
Good one. Actually, yeah.
Probably not great to be talking about Unabomber while campaigning, but
probably not great to be talking about how underrated I think the Unabomber's political philosophy was, but I'm gonna push through that like gut feeling that I shouldn't be doing this, and I'm gonna do it anyway. It was an open-ended question. He could have listed anyone that he thinks is underrated, but Blake Masters, who might well be a senator in not too much longer, felt like Ted Kaczynski was the one that he needed to shed light on. And look, we're showing you that video to give you a little bit of it. It's like a first taste of who this candidate is. This isn't even the scandal that we're here to talk about, Jessica. But I do think it's worth noting that when these guys are so lacking in a fundamental humanity, like emotional intelligence, ability to be a social creature, he couldn't come up with something else in the moment. He just went with the Unabomber. What do you think?
I think it's quite funny considering Ted Kaczynski's background, right? This was someone who was a young student at Harvard who had some radical ideas, and the CIA was conducting experiments there trying to see if they could change people's minds during the Cold War era. And they tortured him and they created a monster. And so he's idolizing someone who is a monster created by the CIA, which is kind of ironic when you think about what the right is. Pretty much a product of US imperialism and just years of brutality in the United States. I think it's ironic that he looks up to someone like Ted Kaczynski.
I know, look, it is possible that maybe he hasn't thought it through too much, but he also strikes me, and from everything that I've seen of his background and his backing from these like crypto connected libertarian like billionaires and everything. This is a guy who definitely thinks that he's thought more about all of his positions than other people. This is a guy who I'm sure has a great deal of confidence in his positions, but when he opens his mouth, tends to be the fact that dumb comes out But anyway, like I said, we're not here to talk about the Ted Kaczynski thing. We're here to talk about gun violence because he has thoughts on it. And if he becomes a senator, his thoughts about gun violence, what causes it, what doesn't, become very important. So he recently said, this is an interview on the Jeff Orovitz Show podcast. He said, we do have a gun violence problem in this country, and it's gang violence. It's people in Chicago, St. Louis shooting each other. Very often, black people, frankly, and the Democrats don't want to do anything about that. Now, I can't say for sure whether, like with the Ted Kaczynski thing, he felt briefly, maybe I should word this differently or not say the thing that pops into my head, but he just pushes forward. He's a bold candidate in that way. So gun violence in America, it's black people. Frankly, that's what he says. Now, look, this is only maybe 10% more explicitly a racist take on gun violence than the vast majority of Republicans will give us. But he chose to go in that direction, Jessica. What do you make of it?
I am almost happy he said this as clearly as he did, because for a long time, Republicans have been trying to make the debate about guns about black on black gun violence, right? They always bring this up. They're obsessed with this talking point. And we know that about 60% of mass shootings were committed by white people. And we know recently in Buffalo that the shooter had Nazi symbols on his gun and mostly targeted black people in a black neighborhood, right? And I think we need to think a little bit more deeply about the root cause of the violence, because ever since the end of slavery in the United States, outside of prisons, right, slavery is still legal as a punishment for a crime under the 13th Amendment. But black people in the United States have not been meaningfully incorporated into the formal economy. And what do people do when they don't have a way to make a living to meet their material needs? They'll go to the illicit economy, right? They're forced essentially to join gangs to meet their material needs. This is happening in the black community and the refugee and immigrant community as well. And so at the end of the day, if you think about it, the reason they're engaging in this violence and the reason they are in gangs is because of the consequences of white people, of people who uphold and create white supremacy in this country and exclude these people systemically from the economy.
Yeah, look, everything that you said makes total sense, and I agree. I think there are so many different ways that this, even when they cloak it a little bit better than Blake Masters is emotionally or intellectually capable of doing, when they say, oh, you care about this mass shooting that just happened that so many do, why don't you care about Chicago? It doesn't make sense for a lot of different reasons. First of all, I think you laid out several different good reasons. Another is the gun control measures that the Democrats would propose to stop the kind of gun violence that they want to focus on would also limit gun purchases in the other side. So arguably they are addressing all of them similarly. Nobody wants more AR-15s in Chicago or St. Louis either. I just also don't want them in Uvalde. So that's definitely true. Also, like, can we focus, like for instance, if it was a thing where every week someone was poisoning kale crops and people were dying, it wouldn't make sense to say, stop trying to regulate kale. After all, people eat trans fats in Tampa Bay. Well, like, I get that those are both about food, but we're identifying a particular sort of crime and we're trying to deal with this. We should also deal with the trans fats thing. I will give you that, but can we focus? That's my point. He's not interested in it though, because this is not about a disagreement on how to fix a problem. It's a disagreement on whether it's a problem. We want to fix it. They don't. They want to get past a politically fraught time where maybe people care enough for something to happen. This is all about stalling. They flavor the way they stall differently. Some of them focus on marijuana. Some of them focus on doors. Some of them focus on Chicago, but it is all about just getting us past this period. He, unlike some of those who are a bit more savvy on Fox News, is trying to get a little bit of the racist good stuff out of this that he knows some of his base wants. But anyway, like I want to give people a little bit more of an idea of who this person is. So I went back and I got a part of one of his ads that we might have talked about previously on the show. Let's go to that excerpt now.
America isn't just an idea. We're a country. We're a people with a history and a culture. This is the home of Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone, of Mark Twain and Ernest Hemingway, of Norman Rockwell and Chuck Berry. Or how about, I can hear the screeching already. That list isn't diverse enough. That's all these people can talk about. But when's the last time you heard NPR talk about American greatness? When's the last time you heard a leftist say anything good at all about our people? They don't do it. If it were up to them, we wouldn't even exist. That's why they're obsessed with tearing down statues.
So look, there have been a lot of Republican ads that are trying to reassure their base that they have the same position on things like great replacement theory and all that. But that is one of the most explicitly racist ads I think I've seen. Like, when have they said a good thing about our people? That's why they don't want us to exist. They think we should have listed black people in our list of great Americans. No, I want to focus on our people. Why won't they compliment us? I have to agree, as a white person growing up, maybe you can attest to this, Jessica, I've never heard anything positive ever said about a white person before. I feel like there's been a lot of erasure of the contributions of white people historically in the arts, in politics, in all of these things. So he's got a point. No, he doesn't believe any of this. But if you can draw from an ad the sort of person that a candidate is trying to appeal to, I think he has been very clear in that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's absolutely the descent into fascism and white supremacy that's so prevalent in our country. And he makes it sound so poetic, right? His delivery, and he's in the middle of the wilderness. And then he's invoking this message of fear into people that he hopes will vote for him out of fear. And he's saying that people on the left, he hardly hears saying good things about our people, but people on the left are saying everyone needs to have healthcare, everyone needs to have a good paying job. If anything, it's an ideology based on values and based on love and caring for other people. Clearly, their ideology is based on hatred, right? It's based on white supremacy. It's very obvious, but it's just veiled in this really weird rhetoric and messages of fear that they try and make seem like these brilliant, groundbreaking ideas. And people are buying into it, and it's unreal. And I'm surprised, honestly, that he didn't just add Ted Kaczynski after Chuck Berry onto that list of people.
Endorsed by, that's, yeah, I don't know. And look, we'll have to see with him. I think the Arizona primary is August 2nd. So we'll see. Maybe he won't be successful, but he's got a lot of backing. Peter Thiel has put $10 million into backing him, to give you an idea of the sort of person that Peter Thiel is and everything. Maybe that won't be enough, but Donald Trump also endorsed him. Like, this is what the right, both the money and their highest profile politicians, are getting behind. This is what they see the future of their party actually being. So have fun with that, America.
That is the only thing that Congress should be working on this week, is how to stop people from being able to kill kids in school. Now, let me tell you, that does not involve gun control. That involves protecting our kids with guns. And so here we have these gun bills that the Democrats are bringing forward. They do not do anything to stop crazy people, stop mentally ill people from obtaining a weapon, any kind of weapon. It could be a gun, it could be a knife, it could be a car, they could make a bomb. It could be anything that they want to use. It does not stop those people from doing that.
It literally does. That is what, like, when you make it illegal for a person to buy a particular gun, like if a particular type of gun becomes illegal, that does make it significantly harder to get that gun. I know that, like, we are attempting to get through politically to persuade people who believe everything about the world based on what they've seen in movies. They think, oh, you just get arms on the black market, you just go across the railroad. No, that's not actually how it works. It's a little bit difficult to do that. When you have background checks, the idea is that will make it harder to get a gun, that it might in some cases stop someone from getting a gun. And the reason I know that they accept that is because they are so opposed to the background checks. If they thought background checks never stopped anyone who shouldn't have a gun from getting it, why would they be so deathly opposed to the implementation of them? But anyway, what you just heard from Marjorie Greene was very similar to most of the Republican arguments against gun control, but just, again, like in a much more stumbling and bumbling and obviously false way. What do you think, Jessica?
First, as a queer person during Pride Month, I have to point out she's got great bisexual lighting in the studio there. Don't know if that's intentional from Marjorie.
I'm gonna have to see more of this video. What? I missed that.
Yeah, she's got bisexual lighting in the studio there. It's really good. But yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about this. I mean, it's letting perfect be the enemy of the good, right? This legislation won't do it in every single case imaginable, therefore we shouldn't pass it. What? That's insane. Red flag laws do exactly that. They allow members of the community, friends, people who see online posts to report when someone, could be dangerous, could be up to something. There have been so many cases when people have been aware that an individual is dangerous or at risk to do something like a mass shooting, and it's gone under the radar. So many of these people have even been flagged by the FBI. We absolutely need red flag laws. And the background checks look into mental health data and mental health records. They look into misdemeanors and they'll look into domestic violence cases. And so for her to say this, it's like, has she read the legislation? Probably, but she wants to convince her viewers that it's something entirely different than what it is so that they're fine with her voting against it.
Well, I disagree with you about the probably that she's read it. And even if she's read it, she definitely hasn't comprehended it. I mean, look, you've watched video of her, you've listened to her speak. I don't generally, my favorite mode to be is not condescending necessarily. She's a genuine idiot, I think. Look, what she said is these laws don't do anything. Like, it literally is gun control making it more difficult to get a gun. That is literally the only thing that it does. The argument that it just doesn't do that, well then what's the problem? If you actually thought it wouldn't stop anyone from getting the gun, why are you so opposed to the law? Like, I don't know how we're supposed to convince these people, how we're supposed to get through to them when they just do not accept the most basic core facts of reality. Like when she says, no, less guns don't protect people. We just need more guns right around the kids. Oh, and also gun control doesn't stop anyone with gun. Like, if you don't believe that laws can stop things, why do you support any laws? Why do you support immigration laws? Why would that be better at stopping migrants than these? Like, why do anything with government? And obviously, look, I'm expressing my frustration. I don't know to what extent she believes anything that she says. And I understand that she's a part of a political movement that is designed to just gum up the works of government, to make government, to make its path impossible, to make it impossible for it to function. The issue, of course, is that every single day that is wasted with commentary like hers, and as we're gonna get into the lack of the ability of the Senate to actually pass anything, there are mass shootings literally every day. There might well be a mass shooting being perpetrated as Jessica and I are talking about this story right now. And again, it feels like, Jessica, because our job is in one form or another, commentator, analyst, whatever, our work is supposed to be in changing people's minds and moving them towards action. In this area, like, people already agree on all of the proposed changes. They agree with us on background checks and on red flag laws and on assault weapon ban and all these different things. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't happen, even though we've convinced them. So at that point, what are we supposed to do other than just sit and watch as more and more gun violence happens? What do we do in a situation like this?
Yeah, I think about this all the time. And I know we're gonna get to Manchin, but I do think about this when it comes to Manchin a lot. And where I've worked, we've done polling on issues of constituents living in certain districts. And we found oftentimes that the way they fall on the issues does not match up to their representative, even when we take a statistically significant sample of the voter file that's representative of the voting population. So they support the issue. Let's say, like, we're talking about gun control. Let's say in Manchin's district, 70% of people support universal background checks on all cases. If Manchin votes against that, what we should do is be texting everyone in the district, calling everyone in the district, and spending money to actually reach out to these people and say, Manchin isn't doing what the people that live in his district, that are his constituents, want him to do. And honestly, I think it's a great way to run grassroots organizing. We could knock doors and tell people to vote for progressives. That's a good use of our time and money. But I think it would also be really important to do issue polling in their districts on all of the issues. And whenever they vote against an issue away from their constituents, we should be telling their constituents exactly what happened.
Yeah. It's difficult. I mean, so for them to change their opinion on an elected official, they have to know what they're actually doing, and occasionally that actually works. Like people's view of Kyrsten Sinema changed quite a bit over the course of last year. In the case of something like Marjorie Greene, I have to assume that most people in her district have some idea of who she is, what she believes, and all that. The fact that they want more of it, that is truly distressing. Anyway, with that said, as you alluded to, we do have to get to Joe Manchin. I know Sophie's probably quite frustrated with me right now. So with that, let's jump into this first video of Joe Manchin.
We know we can do something that would have prevented this, raising the age, making sure that the age at least gives us a chance to work with that person, see and evaluate and have a little maturity to them. And the second thing is that we know that the red flag laws do work as long as there's due process.
So you think raising the age from 18 to 21 for all gun purchases?
Well, it's where it is everything except for rifles and long guns right now, or if it's just for these high capacity weapons. Whatever they want to do, I'm open to doing something that makes sense.
Why do you think people even need an AR-15? Do people need one?
I mean, you have to ask the people that do. I never thought I had a need for that type of a high capacity automatic weapon. And I like to shoot. I like to go out and hunt. I like to go out sports shooting. I do all of that. But I've never felt I needed something of that magnitude.
Okay, so that is Senator Joe Manchin implying that he's very reasonable on this topic of gun control, and he is willing to be a part of the solution in the Senate. These common sense things, raising the age, red flag laws, all of that, making it more difficult for people to buy the sorts of guns that they so frequently go for in these sorts of mass shootings. Now, I remember quite a bit about him and guns, and so in a little bit, we're gonna turn to what he has communicated about the Second Amendment in the past. For now, though, Jessica, I know that we all want to hope that the Senate is going to do something, and we obviously would need people like Joe Manchin to not oppose gun control measures. What do you think about the possibility of something actually being accomplished?
I'm pessimistic that Manchin is already echoing the right-wing talking point that there needs to be due process with red flag laws, because there's due process built into red flag laws. Also, these same people that are complaining about red flag laws violating due process in some way were nowhere to be found when we were having a conversation about stop and frisk and the Fourth Amendment. And now we have precedent. Ohio versus Terry v. Ohio, the Supreme Court case, could be used now as a precedent with red flag laws, where you have to have a reasonable suspicion of wrongdoing before you search and seize anything from a person. That same due process can apply to red flag laws now, thanks to the precedent set, because people wanted to stop and frisk civilians on the street. And so I think it's a problem that Manchin's already talking about red flag laws potentially violating due process. I'm not super optimistic, because we could see by the end of them drafting, a new bill, we could see Manchin say, well, they've added something and now I no longer support this, which is a classic Manchin move.
100%. That's what worries me, because in the past, look, maybe there's been an evolution. Maybe there's been an evolution because it's the mass shootings recently have been so horrible, and that has gotten through the thick layer of coal crusted around his heart. I don't know, but I know how he has tried to appeal to his voters in the past. I want to show you a couple of his ads from back in the day, including this.
I'm Joe Manchin. I approve this ad because I'll always defend West Virginia.
As your senator, I'll protect our Second Amendment rights. That's why the NRA endorsed me. I'll take on Washington and this administration to get the federal government off of our backs and out of our pockets. I'll cut federal spending, and I'll repeal the bad parts of Obamacare. I sued EPA, and I'll take dead aim at the cap and trade bill because it's bad for West Virginia.
So Joe Manchin got a little bit of criticism for that back in the day. That did not stop him from doing it again. Take a look at this.
That's me, shooting the cap and trade bill, because it was bad for West Virginia. Hey, I haven't changed. I might be a few years older, but I'll still take on anyone that messes with West Virginia. Now the threat is Patrick Morrissey's lawsuit to take away health care from people with pre-existing conditions. He is just dead wrong, and that ain't gonna happen. I'm Joe Manchin, and I approve this message because for me, it's all about West Virginia.
Yeah, that's me, in case you missed that. I haven't changed. I still believe that political ads should have a lot of gun imagery. And anything you don't like politically, you should shoot. And if anybody messes with West Virginia, I'll take them on. I'm not normalizing political violence or anything. I'm literally pointing a rifle at the person filming the ad I'm doing right now. But all this is totally normal. And he's a very reasonable person when it comes to guns, Jessica. That is the only point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I think it's funny. The ad is just, it's so well said. I'm gonna take away the bad stuff from Obamacare. It's like, what a very specific argument, Joe. What bad stuff? Like, that's all he's gotta say to convince people. And I think what's funny about this ad is when the paper bill just like flies up, you can see all of the holes in the cardboard, suggesting it took very many tries for him to actually hit the center.
Exactly, Jesus. It's just so. Like, yeah, he's gonna be our savior. Maybe he will. I can't wait to be wrong. I think that would be awesome, but kind of doubt it. Okay, let's very briefly jump to a minor bit of news. I think it's noteworthy that's coming out this particular week. Donald Trump is apparently champing at the bit to announce that he's gonna be running for president. I know what you're thinking. Like, the election's in literally years. Why would he do that now? No, that's a very good point that you make. Normally, you would not announce for at least a year from now, but apparently he does have a good reason that he's considering doing it early. It is that he is reportedly bored at Mar-a-Lago. He's just bored with his life and what has become of his life, and he wants something to spice it up. And since he's never heard of a hobby or spending time with family, or maybe he's actually spent time with his family and they look reprehensible, he needs something to do, and so he's considering launching a bid for the presidency. Two people in his orbit say they've been asked informally to hold the 4th of July as a date for a possible announcement. Now, Jason Miller says it's not true. No day has actually been reserved. Others say that if most of the candidates he endorses win their general election, he'll announce in November. If they don't, he'd push it back to January or February. I think the idea being that if a bunch of the candidates he endorsed failed, he would want to take a little bit of time off to like get their stink off of him. I don't know. If he waits until January or February, that is at least a little bit more in the normal period of time that you would be running. All of this to me, Jessica, feels very defensive. It feels like he wants to get out in advance of other people. Maybe it's just boredom. Maybe it's a little bit of fear of people like Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, right? Ron DeSantis, fear that he's extremely popular among Republicans and could overtake Trump if Trump ends up running in the primary. I think it's also the fact that we've got these potential criminal cases coming before him. And we know that Donald Trump loves to use campaign funding for other things. He's probably worried about legal fees, trying to use that money to cover legal fees for cases that come against him. Also, it gives him the opportunity to say, they're only bringing these cases against me because I'm running for office again. I think it's more strategy than he's bored. I do believe he's probably bored at Mar-a-Lago, but I think there's a lot more going on here. And I think he's afraid that a lot of his endorsed candidates will end up losing, and he's going to have to confront that. So it's better to start running now and build energy behind those candidates so they have a better shot as well.
Yeah, perhaps. Maybe he's seeing some of the recent polls showing DeSantis actually beating him in some conservative straw polls. Those are not, actual primary estimates or anything like that. But maybe he's seeing the fact that DeSantis is getting a lot of news attention. I don't know. Maybe he's feeling nervous. Anyway, with that said, if you are watching on one of your linear platforms or listening to the podcast, thank you so much as always for listening. We do have more to get to though. So we're gonna take a couple minute break. Don't go anywhere. Jessica and I'll be back after this. The manipulations that are used to convince people to support politicians directly opposed to their economic interests are so transparent, so obvious, so comical that I feel like a madman for thinking, how could they work? How could you convince so many people in such a ham-fisted, obvious way? How could you get a new generation to think Elon Musk is their hero? I don't know how virtually anything works. All I do is pay attention, and the more that I pay attention, the less I understand about why things end up the way they are. Kusaragi said in the super chat, great white replacement theory makes it sound like we are installing bloodthirsty sharks into the country. Oh wait, yeah, there's an element of that too. Straw Hat Dragon says, I was today years old when I figured out a Deadhead is a Grateful Dead fan. I'm 29. Hope you all have a good day. Well, look, I don't know anything about music, and even I knew that. So we're gonna have to catch you up a bit.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.